Aria, what's going on?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Or good afternoon. Sorry, it's
No,
afternoon.
no, no, it's okay. There's no, time doesn't exist anymore because I told you, you're like happy Thursday, and I was like, maybe Thursday. It's not. I have no idea. But no, man, thank you so much. You beat me to the punch. I was gonna start with some words of gratitude because I think that's the easy way when you're talking to somebody to just kind of we talked about having the coffee jitters right now. So we're gonna try to calm it down. So I want to thank you um, for the work that you're doing, and specifically allowing Love Lab to help support you in that work. It was kind of weird. It's the first time we've ever done any work where we weren't on the ground with you, um, and it felt weird to me not being a part of it because I know in the past, I have my own personal feelings about people who like donate or who want to help, but they don't necessarily want to get their hands dirty in a way. You know what I mean? So, so yeah, that was weird for me, but I'm always grateful for people that are doing the work, that are supporting uh, folks, specifically Black and Brown.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was I have to say, well, first of all, we're really grateful to you and your team at Love Lab for saying yes and supporting our effort.
Nope.
Um, we as a project, we are a cultural district. And so the pandemic is really forcing us to look at where our role is in serving our community and where the gaps are for our folks. And so, yeah, we just had this vision of doing this COVID-19 testing activation event, making sure that folks in the Tenderloin had equitable access to get tested. Many of the folks in our neighborhood and in our corridor, there's not a lot of messaging about harm reduction for COVID-19, especially if you're living in tent encampments or, you're living in communal living spaces like SROs in downtown. Like there's no messaging. And so we wanted to make sure that we were offering that. And then, Sean, who's our director of strategic partnerships, was raving about y'all. And then y'all came through with all this food, and there was like a whole line around the block of folks who wanted to who wanted the food, and then we had care packages and stuff. And it just we got so much love from our district supervisor who was there, Matt Haney, and then Mayor London Breed, her team, said that she was very happy that it happened. Um, and the ask is that we continue to do it. So I'm gonna reach out to y'all
Well,
for us to do it again. But it was over three. We gave away over 300 meals and get care packages,
okay.
and then I think we tested over 100 people
All right.
uh, within 3-4 hours. Um,
Beautiful.
And the city Department of Public Health was saying they normally test a maximum of 50 people a day. So it was like one of the most sort of numbers of tests that they've done in that short of a time frame. So I'm just grateful that y'all came through and helped us.
Well, no, that's. I'd like to think that we are not only doing the work because it does fulfill us as people, but hopefully that we get more support and we that energy is infectious, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm curious because I watched a couple of your interviews to
Uh-huh.
prepare for this one, and I pick up a lot of creative energy from you. You are a creative, and I'm
I try.
this creation of the is it the first? Is it the first transcultural district
Yeah, in the world,
in the world?
actually. Isn't
Yeah,
that crazy?
it's not crazy. It's insane because I know nothing about. I mean, yes, we have other cultural districts like Chinatown and like Little Italy and stuff like that, but this is something completely different. And the amount of planning that goes into that, I can only imagine the amount of collaboration, patience, and everything else. So, if you don't mind, kind of walk me through where the idea came from. Um, yeah, the energy. How did you meet the necessary people in order to make this happen?
Yeah. Oh, okay. It all started long ago. No, I'm just kidding. um, no, so let's see. Let's take it back. Not too long ago, but it was 2016. Um, at that time, I was deputy director of St. James Infirmary,
Okay.
which is a sex worker health clinic,
Mhm.
and one of the only one in the country, actually. And then Stephanie Ashley, who's a co-founder of the district, was the executive director of St. James. And we received a call from Nate, who is a political consultant, and he's run campaigns for like Matt Haney and Hillary Ronan, and he was a co-owner of the Stud, which is an LGBT bar, a historic bar that actually just closed. But
Over on like
uh,
or something like that. Was that right? Not is it full?
mhm,
Yeah. Okay.
and we got a call from him saying that there was about to be a huge development happening on Market Street, but it's in that pocket of Market Street that goes into the Tenderloin,
Oh,
and that it was going to be luxury hotels and luxury condos for sale, and it was going to start gentrification in the Tenderloin.
okay.
And so for those who know San Francisco know that unfortunately in 2010, 2011, there was a huge wave of displacement of folks of color and folks who had generational ties to neighborhoods like the Mission,
Mhm.
to Soma, and then of course like Oakland and other areas of the Bay Area. And the Tenderloin has sort of been the last frontier for a lot of development. And while I'm not entirely opposed to development, I do acknowledge that unfortunately the consequence is that so many of our folks lose their place.
Yeah.
And the Tenderloin has been one of the few places that trans people have traditionally been able to live
Mm.
in the city, partly because of affordability, but also just history. Mm. So we got that phone call. We met. Um, our clinic and the work that was 2 blocks away, and we had learned from a historian that there were like LGBT historical assets in the building. They were no longer existing, but once upon a time in the 1920s,
Yeah.
there were 2 bars there during Prohibition era that operated as a speakeasy, and then there were underground tunnels where trans people, gay people, non-binary people would come and hang out, do shows, and all of this happening at a time where it was illegal to have a trans expression, but also a gay expression as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, fast forward, we started our advocacy with a very ask, which was just that the developer provide a monetary resource community benefit to the trans community, because they had reached out to so many other like large conglomerate nonprofits
Mm.
and offer them resources for the mitigation of possible displacement and undue harm to community. But the Tenderloin has the densest transgender population of any other city in the United States.
Okay.
And so that was what we led with. And Honey Mahogany would then become involved. And she had been on RuPaul's Drag Race, and she was doing a lot of politics, like running for like the Democratic Central Committee and Harvey Milk Club, and then Janetta Johnson also became involved, transgender activist, prison abolitionist, and she leads TGI Justice Project, which is a prison abolition project in Selma.
Okay.
And so at that time, we shared an office. And so that was our group of like primary group, like holding this advocacy together. And we started involving the district supervisor at that time, which was Supervisor Jane Kim. And, you know, she was like, guys, like, I just, you know, I want to support y'all, but like, y'all are late in the game. And, you know, this may not be possible. Like maybe you all should find a way just to further protect your community in something more permanent. And I think we went back to the drawing board and realized that we needed to start a district. And we needed to cement in the ground that people live here of all different types, but that most of our folks that do live in this neighborhood are most impacted by poverty and disenfranchisement.
Okay.
And we need to name that, and we need to also name our history in this neighborhood, and try to make sure that in the future, instead of trying to fight displacement, that we're fighting to economically empower our folks, and empower them to be able to live here and have opportunities to have the housing that they want, the job they want that are affirming, and to own businesses in this neighborhood, like other neighborhoods that we've seen, like the Castro or the Bayview, or you know, really wanting that, because I think so much of what exists publicly around trans people is really about our disparity. And so you see the news articles about us being murdered. You see the news articles about us living in poverty. And I think a lot of people forget that we all play a part in that disenfranchisement. When you go into your neighborhood and you go to your local coffee shop, or you go to your dry cleaner, or you go to the grocery store, or you go to the Apple store to go pick up your like new iPad or whatever, like count the trans people that are working in those spaces. And it's not because we're not applying, you know what I mean? And so, you know, our rationale is like, okay, well then it's our responsibility to make sure this is a vehicle for trans people to own their own shit, and then, excuse my language, and then reach back and hire our folks, and that's how we'll be economically empowered. But yeah, anyways, sorry, I like went all over the place.
That's exactly what I want to hear. I mean, one of the reasons why I enjoy doing the podcast is because it is like a longer format, and I think that's something that we're not used to. That we're getting back into, longer forms of like media, right? I think we're bombarded sometimes with these short blurbs from Instagram or social media, and so we take bits and pieces, right? But there is something really unique to an organic conversation, and when you have time to really go deep and talk about that process, and you can't just hit bullet points when you're talking about creating a district, right? That's so what was that the political process in that? I heard you say, you know, I think Jane Kim told you like you're a little late to the party. What did you mean when what was that explanation? Like, yeah, you're late. Was that?
So, you know, basically, and this is very common in my work. This is like a motif that keeps coming up, which is that we are always the afterthought
Mm.
when it comes to anything. And I think it's especially tricky for me because not only am I trans, I'm also a woman and I'm also Black. And so that compounded experience informs my worldview.
Yeah.
And I can't separate each one.
Mhm.
And so I think it affirmed in a negative way that that I'm not crazy, that we are literally the last to be considered. And so yeah, our we were asking for a community benefit through a community benefit process.
Okay.
And so there was a legislation that made it so that developers, real estate developers, when into neighborhood, in this corridor in particular, the mid-market corridor, that they have to provide some community benefit to offset the displacement because so much displacement had happened
Sure.
in such a short time frame. And so what Jane Kim was referencing at the time is that they had already doled out millions of dollars to all these different nonprofits in the Tenderloin, to the tune of 20 million, right? Like this isn't, and then they were only offering us, I think at that time, 100,000 to
Okay.
just like be quiet. We were like, no, we want millions too. Like
Yeah.
we need to house our folks. Like we need to make sure that folks are owning their businesses. We need to make sure that like all these things. And so the supervisor was like, and she was not wrong. Like we came in the last month of the community benefit process, which they had been doing 9 months. But in our minds, that was their fault. That wasn't ours. Like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
they reached out to all of the folks that they were already in proximity to.
Mhm.
And who was in that room? I mean, myself, Janetta, and Honey, we went and met with the other stakeholders that had been involved in the process. And they were yelling and screaming at us, telling us that we should be grateful, and that we're taking up space and be quiet and go away. And all the people that were doing that were like these white men who run these nonprofits.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as soon as you said nonprofit, I've had plenty of years working in the nonprofit world, and for, the big ones, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA,
Yeah,
um, you know, I and I've seen it, I had my own experience just like, wow, the higher up you go, the more clear it is that a lot of these nonprofit organizations are very much controlled by white males. And
yeah.
we look at boards, yeah, dominated, dominated. And it makes you wonder like, okay, so you're dictating the direction an organization goes that serves.
But
Uh,
their client, right? You're right. Their client base looks like us.
you're right.
You know
Totally.
what I mean? Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like 90% Black and Latinx and folks living below the poverty line. But then the leadership and the visionaries in solving our disparity are the ones that are disconnected from poverty in this way altogether.
Yeah, totally. I had an experience working with the Boys and Girls Club, and I've had my background, my passion is teaching Black and brown kids to swim as a life-saving skill, right?
Mhm.
And we had an issue. I worked at a clubhouse that was, I would say, 90% Black, um,
Mhm.
and yet our aquatics program was less than 3%. And you know there was no discussion. I was like, well, it's really strange that we have a clubhouse with a pool in it, and everyone sees it, but no one wants to talk about it. And then in my attempts to put some programming together that really addressed the historical significance of and the historical disparity, um,
Mhm.
it just was like kind of in one ear and out the other. And this isn't to like, this isn't intended to like rag on the Boys and Girls Club. But that's really hard when you don't have a seat at the table, similar to what you're talking about when you're going to those meetings and people are like, okay, that's great, but we've already.
Or we only have token representation, right? Where we just have the one.
Yep.
And then the onus is on the one person in the room. And this has been like the experience of my entire career. I'm always the one that's supposed to represent an entire population.
Sure.
And yeah, we can't do token representation. Like, we gotta have our folks, not just in, because then there's the other portion of that too, where a lot of, and this isn't just nonprofits, this is companies too, where when you do give them that tap and say that they need to have different folks from different backgrounds and different perspectives in the room, they then hire folks, but it's all the all entry level, right? And so the security guard, the front desk worker, the case manager are of the community, but then the president, the vice president, the treasurer, the director of finance, the program directors, they're not, right? And so then the power is still maintained, and we don't get decision-making power, which means that it's not informed by us and our lived experiences.
So day to day, where do you get your energy from to keep doing the work? I'm in my I'm finishing up my master's degree in social work at San Francisco State. And thank you. And I think it's such whenever you're doing direct human service, and specifically with marginalized communities, and underserved communities, it's not, there's not a line of people thanking you for the work you're doing, right? And you have to be motivated by people next to you on your team, right? And in various communities. But sometimes, I don't think this work ever stops, right? This is not just like next week it's all over. Or maybe you do finish a project next week and you're like, oh, that was great. But then you have to move on, right? Like you're like, oh, okay, well, there's more work to be done. And I think you can run low. You can get, you can get beat down. You can just get tired because there's only so much you have to give. And so where do you get your energy from?
It depends on the day. It really just, that's such a tricky question for me. For me, I never dreamed of doing this work. So I'm a girl who moved to San Francisco as a teenager, who came to try to study fashion, and then went to fashion school, and then was sleeping on the bar, and then was doing survival sex work in the Tenderloin, and life happened. And then the only job that I was offered was actually at a project called Trans Thrive, and it was a drop-in center in the Tenderloin, and it's where trans people will go to get things like showers or needles if they're using services, case management, food. There was a pantry, like it was like all those things, right? And I took the job and was like, okay, well, this is the only place that will hire me. I'll work a job, and then I'm gonna go and then follow my dream. My dream was to be like a visual merchandiser for Banana Republic or something like that. And then that never happened. So over 10 years later, almost 15 years later, I'm still doing this work. And I think for me, I've learned my relationship has changed. I am very lucky to get to do what I do, and to represent my community in the best way that I can, and to advocate. And I get burned out all the time. And I think for me, there's a couple reinforcements that motivate me. One is that, I work in a neighborhood that I also used to live in. And so I know exactly what that experience feels like. I know exactly what it feels like to be a trans woman with no money, and to live in the Tenderloin and feel like you can't leave the Tenderloin. Trans women in the Tenderloin hardly leave. Literally the boundaries of the Tenderloin. Like when you live in this space, you're sort of taught that this is the only place you can be in San Francisco, is this container. And I know what that feels like. And so my reference point when I'm in a space where I take things for granted is just to know that I'm advocating for the girls that I was doing sex work with on Poke and Post. But also today, like I literally run into these girls all the time. When I walk down the street, the girls will come up to me and they'll ask me for things. They'll ask me like, where can I get services? This is coming up for me. I'm having this issue with my housing, or and that is what holds me accountable. And I'm actually really grateful for it, is that I still get to see community in this way, and that when they see me, they don't care about who I am now. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they're like, girl, you the plug, so tell me what I need to do to make ends meet. And yeah, and then I would say my team. I am really blessed in that I get to work with some of the most brilliant minds in my day-to-day work. And I've worked at different organizations and projects, and you know, a lot of times like this is the way it's done, and you know, same old and whatever. But I think, you know, our culture as a team is we really try to be a think tank in the midst of rolling out these projects and these initiatives. But we really try to think critically and actively think about how our work can meet the gaps of what people need, and how it can be of high impact and responsive in real time. And everyone's so passionate. And so I feel like we kind of vibe as a group where, you know, if my energy goes low, then like Sean or Juniper or Spring or Aiden will like help pull me up, and then the same thing happens. And I think that we all are reinforced with our commitment to ensuring that we're creating an environment that celebrates the history, the legacy, the presence of trans people, and create work towards creating a utopia as best we can.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, what you're talking about is what people and when to say people, organizations are paying millions of dollars to figure out, right? How do we keep people happy and engaged in the work that they're doing? And you know, I've had some experience working with some technology companies around this idea or this obstacle, and we approach it from a framework of mental health. You know, I don't know how you can go to. I mean, if you have thousands of people that are not taking care of themselves, I don't know how you can expect them to be okay at work, right? There's no, just because you walk into a physical door or a virtual door doesn't stop the other parts of your life, the other aspects of your life. And so of course it's going to affect your work. And then add on top of that, I don't know about you, but it's easier for me to connect with a person than a product, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's much easier. And I'm not saying, you know, the people that are, you know, keeping Instagram and these other social media platforms aren't doing great work, because they've without a doubt helped me, and I would say have helped you get the message out. You know what I'm saying? So I'm grateful for those folks as well. You talked about, oh man, you talked about a bunch of stuff. But this idea of not leaving the neighborhood and not feeling comfortable in leaving, right? This isn't just a problem for trans women, right? We see that in communities of color, and we see that in communities. We see this in so many, right? In that theme. And you touched on, I wanted to ask you this. Do you see that for all trans women, or is there a difference between trans women of color and those that are not?
Um, I guess for me, my experience has been that it mostly impacts Black and Latina trans women in
Mm,
a very particular way. I think it's so nuanced, right? Because we're a compounded experience. And so
mhm.
what we do know is that the closer you are to whiteness,
Yep.
if it does, you're more socially accepted. So,
Mhm.
Sarah Mcbride is a trans woman who is now the first trans elected official in the Senate.
Mhm.
She just made history at election night. But you can't also ignore that a huge reason why she is successful in politics is because she is white,
Mhm.
and that is a factor. I think it also depends on socioeconomic status as well. So in the Tenderloin, we got some white trans folks who are actually really struggling. And, they maybe come from a family that was already in poverty, and then them being trans and then having that background may have presented to be a barrier in their life towards being able to be economically empowered in ways that we see other maybe white trans folks being economically empowered in spite of their trans identity. Um, I think, for me as a Black trans woman in the Tenderloin, like coming here at a young age, it's a different time now than it was back then. And back then, I'll tell you a quick story, but basically, me and my homegirl, we were like always motivating each other to be on the come up. And
Okay.
so we met each other when we were homeless. Our boyfriends at that time were friends with each other. And that's how we met each other. And then we became best friends, and we like inspired each other. It was like the only options for Black trans women in the Tenderloin was to strip or do sex work.
Yeah.
And I felt empowered in doing sex work, but I also clung to this idea of like, I want to lead a normal life. That was always my thing. And so now I'm like, what is normal, girl? But especially with OnlyFans, I'm like, everybody on there now.
Look,
Uh,
I don't know what normal is. I mean, you can throw that out the window. We're at
right?
a new life. And yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah. And so we used to have this routine. We had started working jobs, and we got our apartments and stuff in the Tenderloin, and so we lived and worked in the same neighborhood. And I think that's important to know. And so we never went to Westfield Mall, even though it's on Market Street and it's like 4 blocks away,
yeah.
because we knew we couldn't afford anything in there, right? And I remember when I would go out with and I don't think this is like a white person thing per se, but I do feel like there's ways that other people of other backgrounds have have a sense of access to
Yeah.
those things. And
Yeah.
so even if they didn't have money, like my white friends would be like, "Oh, we're going to Neiman Marcus just to get cookies." And as a Black trans woman, I'm like, the only reason I've ever been in there is to boost clothes and try to run out.
Obviously.
So so those things always felt inaccessible to me because it was always like, well, girl, you ain't got no money. You don't have any reason to be in those spaces. And so for my birthday, we were working. We were really excited. I went to Victoria's Secret.
Okay. All right. Shout out to Victoria.
Shout out to Victoria's Secret. And so me and my homegirl, we went shopping. And I think this was like the first time in our lives as adults that we were able to just like, oh, someone's behind you. Okay.
Oh, yes,
Um,
working on the house. So
um,
you were trying to tell my brother.
but this was like the first time as an adult that I think I was able to like spend a couple $100 on myself that wasn't related to my rent or food or, and mind you, I was shopping at Food for Less and taking my cart up to Safeway from the Tenderloin, walking it up to Safeway on Church and Market. Like, I would try to find any reason to like save as much money as possible, right?
Yeah.
And if that meant not paying $1.75 to get on the movie,
Yeah.
like that was just my life at that time. And so we're walking from Victoria's Secret and we're walking past this hotel. Now, mind you, this hotel is actually on Geary Street. It's like in Nob Hill.
Okay.
Now I would look back and say that there's nothing special about it. I walk by it all the time. I'm like, okay, it's a little boutique hotel. But back then, when I was homeless and I used to walk to Maiden Lane, and so to get there, I would go down Geary, and I would see people dining in the window of this hotel. So in the and on the first floor of the hotel, there was this huge window where you could see people dining in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And you know, they always look so dressed up and so fancy, and I would always tell myself stories about who they were and why they were there, and like maybe he's gonna propose, and like that was just how my mind worked at that time. Like I was, you know, and so my dream was like, one day I'm gonna eat in that hotel in the window. Like once I become successful, that's what I'm gonna do.
Yep.
And this was at a time when I had holes in my Payless boots and it was raining. Like, do you know what I mean? Like this was just, now I'm like, girl, that hotel food is horrible. But anyway.
Oh, right. Right. I didn't know the game.
At that time, that was what motivated me to hustle, right? And so my friend and I are walking up, and we had this routine where we would go hang out at Union Square, buy a coffee at Starbucks, sit on the steps, talk, people watch, smoke weed, and then we would go back into the Tenderloin and go home.
Yeah.
And so, and then if we were hungry, we would go to Jack in the Box.
Yep.
Okay. And so normally she was like, let's go to Jack in the Box. Like, we're gonna get jalapeno poppers and ultimate cheeseburgers and whatever, and those egg roll or those tacos or whatever, and we'll celebrate your birthday there. And I'm like, no, like, why don't we? And so we will walk past this hotel, and the table in the window is empty, and I was like, oh my God, like I think I want to eat in there.
Yep.
Like, she was like, girl, you ain't got enough money to eat in there, girl. Like, you know, you can't afford that, and I can't afford that either. That is wishful thinking. Come on, girl. And I was like, no, like, come on, like, let's, like, we don't have to get like entrees. We can get appetizers and a drink. Like, I was just like, I just want to try it. And she was like, I dare you. You're not going to go in there. And the doorman was standing there, and I guess he thought we were going to buy it. And I was like, I'd like to come in. And he was like, oh, okay. And so he opens the door, and she was like, you're not going to do it. And I was like, watch me.
Right.
And I marched to the concierge, and I was like, I want to sit in that table. And fast forward, that was like a tangible and intangible experience that shifted my perspective about what my life could be as a Black trans woman in San Francisco. And I would say that was like a huge defining moment for me that made me pivot my aspirations to be more than just that. Yeah. And so I want every Black trans woman in the Tenderloin to feel that, that we can have access to those things, that we can create that access. And so another project that I have called Kween Culture Initiative, that was part of its inspiration. And one of our first efforts is I knew the good folks at Sephora headquarters, and they wanted to create an initiative for trans folks to like build self-esteem and confidence, and you know, they wanted to work with me, and I was like, okay, great, but I want the store closed down. And they were like, oh no, like we normally have the little workshop in the corner of the store. And I was like, I'm gonna bring Black trans women, and I want it to be iconic for them, and I want this closed down. And so I don't know what I was on. I don't know what motivated me to talk like that, but they said yes. And we took our girls to Sephora and we had the store to ourselves.
Hmm.
And those, we were able to sponsor stuff for the girls. And then the girls were just getting their own stuff. And the staff was like, oh, here, have these samples. And
Yeah.
I've never seen that experience of, I think we had about 10 Black trans women and everyone's face just lit up. Like, it's like, it's this veil of like, it just went away. Like we could in fact have access to those things.
What you were on was that energy. And I got to think that you were motivated. And the more I get around, I said you were a creative in the beginning. And again, looking at the work that you've done. And I think when you get that energy, it's hard for other people to turn away when they recognize it. You know what I mean? I've seen this thing. I mean, doing this podcast, it started off like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna have some people on, and now I'm like 25 episodes deep, right? And it was just, but it's become so easy, and I'm getting connected with people that I never would have been connected with before. So I think from what I hear, it's like, you're like, no, I'm not accepting. I'm not accepting anything anymore. Right now, I know that the people that I serve, the people that I advocate for, they deserve this. And right. So I don't understand. Yeah, there is no other. It's like, I don't understand why you wouldn't. You know what I mean? And I'm sure whoever that team was or those folks at Sephora were like, yeah, we should just give them the whole damn store. Yeah, fuck it.
Right. They were so supportive, and to this day they're still supportive. Obviously with the pandemic we haven't done anything like that as of yet again, but they've been consistently supportive. And you're right, I'm someone who is, I guess, a creative who has to work in a very defined role as like an executive director. So my job involves a lot of number crunching, which I'm not good at, and organizing and planning and whatever. But that is something that inspires me. Is just our commitment to excellence. Like I can't do, mediocrity is not an option for me in my own personal life.
Yeah.
And then in my work, like I want us to give our folks the best that we can. And I think that's what makes us different than a lot of nonprofits is, we don't do direct service. Like every single day is like a deliverables driven model. Like, I've worked in those spaces and the burnout happens 10 times sooner, and it's longer lasting and the turnover is high, and folks it's not work that's designed for you to age in necessarily. So my heart goes out to folks who are working in those spaces, especially now. But for me, the way I see it is like when the transgender district or Kween Culture comes through, they deserve the best that we have to offer them. Because in so many ways, sometimes our projects or our events or our efforts are the only sort of piece of access that they get to have outside of what's going on for them, and we hope to inspire through that.
What I really appreciate about the work you're doing with Kween Culture, when I went to go read about it, is it is focused on joy, and it is focused around creating happiness. And like, you said it before, the stigma or the message that we are bombarded with when we talk about not, I don't want to say bombarded, that we are exposed to, or maybe overly exposed to, is like the darker side of the trans experience. And as much as we need to have those conversations, it's also to important to recognize the positives and the great things that are happening, right? Like there's always going to be obstacles. There's always going to be issues. And I think I think we're starting to recognize that as a culture, as a society, right? We can't keep on just stigmatizing every single group. You know what I mean? I had to clean up. I had to clean up our Instagram feed. You know what I mean? Because I was just starting to look at it. I'm like, man, every time I look, it's this many people died, and this is this is the statistic. I'm like, okay, yep, I got it. But who's doing the good work? Where are there people? Because I would assume so. So I really do appreciate you taking that approach. So yeah, where did Kween Culture come from?
Okay, so we had started the district.
Okay.
It became legally recognized in January 2017, and it became global news. It was like the world's first. That's how we the world's first. Because I thought for sure there had to be some, like in India, trans people are empowered in their political system right now. Like they're having first trans mayors and governors and things like that. And then, Thailand has its own, trans culture that's part of the broader popular culture there, and in the Philippines. And so I thought for sure like something like this had to already exist, but it became global news. And my sister, co-founder of the district, Honey Mahogany, went on to lead it. Janetta went back to doing what she was doing with TGI Justice Project. And then I went and worked for the mayor's office in San Francisco, and as a LGBT policy advisor. And so I, at the same time, was doing like speaking engagements and stuff across the country. These tech companies, corporations, et cetera, would book me to come and share with their staff or their constituents about, trans people for Pride or Trans Awareness Day or whatever, right? And then, I would go there like excited and happy, and then they'd be like, so many of you all are dying. Can you speak on that? And like what's the one thing that they need to know about trans people? And like when you got your surgery, like how did you feel? Like did you feel like you were a woman inside? Like that was the energy that they would help me with. And then I would get on stage and I just felt like I was like absent-mindedly falling into it, where I had rehearsed it to a T, where it was like, trans people are marginalized and disenfranchised and experience violence and stigma and discrimination and unemployment and HIV and murders and blah, blah, like, and all of those things are true, but that's not my experience with other trans people.
Sure.
Like, even in my lowest parts of my life, right, where I'm sleeping on the BART train and, doing survival sex work on the street and in the tenement, that I hop back to, like, we all were going through it and probably didn't even know where we were going to sleep that night. But when we would come together, we would laugh and joke, and we call it reading. So we would read each other, play the dozens. That was just the way it was. Like, it was almost one of those things I would look forward to. Like, we would show up to the corner. There was a bar called Divas at that time. And like, we would all go in there and like connect and talk and for our clients to come in and out and, whatever. And those are the moments that I would have with my sisters. Like, and, there was shade and stuff too, but I think my experience was always the more joyful ones. And so, our disparity is real. I don't want people to think that it's not. It absolutely is. We're marginalized and disenfranchised at every single level of society, but most especially socially, right? Like, there's still, even though you see trans people on television or what have you, and people have more access to trans people in our stories, like, we're still seeing that trans people are being murdered at an absolutely high rate,
Yeah.
right? We're experiencing a genocide, and we do have to talk about why it's happening. We stop it. We do have to talk about why we see that when we talk about poverty and unemployment and things like and discrimination, we have to talk about. We also have to talk about how we have such a rich culture and way of being with each other,
Mm.
and our resilience. We have to celebrate that, and we have to create spaces for trans people to come together for joy
Yeah.
and not as a reaction.
Mm.
So much of what exists for trans people in our own community about coming together is to march or to do a vigil or to protest or to do a rally.
Yeah.
And then that's it. It's like that's like oftentimes a lot of times the only way we get to see each other. And so I was actually inspired. My dad was a bishop, so I grew up very religious. And I remember every summer I used to have to do vacation Bible school, and I used to have to do camps. And so I was inspired by like Christian camps where they have the resources to take to events or bowling or trans people. LOL. Sorry, the churches have resources to take Christian kids to go bowling.
Really? Damn, that's the hell out of me.
And that's what I was inspired by. I was like, what if I replicated that for Black trans people? And that's exactly what we did. So we've done like I said, we've done partnerships with Sephora where we've done these like private events, and it's all about self-esteem boosting and how to find your light through foundation or just like trying and hanging out with your girls and having a good night and playing with different makeup products. And then we've also done forums and discussions like at the Commonwealth Club that folks can find on YouTube where we've discussed things like violence against trans people or how we can combat poverty, And then our most famous projects, I think, are the ones that are very luxurious, where we were able to take 10 Black trans women to Hawaii for a self-care retreat.
Oh, wow. Now we're talking.
That just like fell together. I have to say, like, I'm so grateful to the folks that support as if they can. So San Francisco Pride actually had sponsored the airfare.
Okay.
And then the owner, her name is Erin Wilson actually, and she had all these Marriott credits, and so she donated her Marriott credits for us to get everyone their rooms.
Yeah.
And then we fundraised to cover food and excursions and stuff. Yeah. But it was it's like one of the best retreats I've ever been on. It's like half the girls had never even left the state of California. So some of those girls were on a plane for the very first time. And then we stayed in Waikiki. We stayed at a resort, and we made sure to mix. We had like the bougie 5-star restaurant situations. And then we also had like Hard Rock Cafe and, whatever. And girls would then in the evenings do what they wanted to do. So they would go clubbing or whatever. And then in the mornings, we had our self-care workshops, and we talked about things like the power of our names or why we are our sister's keeper. Like, I mean, I know it sounds a little cultish, but like, it was like my own personal moment, even though I was a facilitator, where I shared something that I had not said aloud ever before about like an experience that I've had with my family. And the way that these women just like hugged and embraced me, and then we shared our stories, and then we went to the ocean and left it there. It was like this very, I know, it's like hippie trippy, but it gave me so much closure on so many different things. And so to go through it with people that I didn't have to translate my experience to was phenomenal. And we've been asked by so many girls across the country since then to bring that back. Even with COVID, they're like, well, we could all get tested. Can we go? I'm like, Let's see what.
Hold,
Let's see.
hold on one second. Let's pause for a second before we start hopping on planes and going to Hawaii. Yeah. I don't think any of what you said is trippy. Like I said before, I have a unique relationship with water, and I think it is. We know it's super healing, and I had a similar experience about 2 months ago. I went maybe like 2 hours north of San Francisco, and did a little climbing. Definitely not safe. As close as I could get, out into the ocean. And I swim in the open. I swim in the bay, every week. That's something that brings me peace. But I remember sitting there and working through a whole lot of shit, specifically with, uh, who I am as a person and my family, and the things that I want to change about myself. And I remember like taking a breath in, exhaling, and giving that to the water, right? Like just being like, that's yours. I'm done with it. I've acknowledged it. I've sat with it, and I can move on. So that experience brings me joy because someone else had that experience, and I don't think we talk about that. I mean, just specifically another person of color, because my
Right.
experience with water is a little different. You know what I mean? So when you,
So I don't know how to swim. So
well, I hope I hope that sometime in the future that maybe you add that to the list of things.
I need to. But so I play in the water in a very shallow way, and then when the waves start coming, I'm like,
I've heard it all before. I heard, I'm like, just hang out in a little shallow area, no problem. Yeah, right. And but either way. Um, so I want to talk about this event that you got going on. That we need we need to get out there. So what's going on? Was it live / virtual event?
it's a I'm so excited. I can't wait for everybody to see it. It is a winter gala fundraiser event. It's happening virtually on December 11th. It's a live stream celebration of our work, and we're fundraising for a goal of poverty, specifically addressing houselessness for trans people, and we're doing so in partnership with a project that is so similar to ours in a way. It's the House of Tulip in New Orleans, and very similar to us. They were founded by Black trans women, and they came together, and they actually founded this year. And so they're a community land trust project where they are literally buying houses for and putting trans people in there to live.
Oh, beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And so they've already launched their program in January.
Okay.
And so that's what we're fundraising for. And we have such a beautiful show for everybody. We have a really nice lineup of folks who said yes. And I'm just so grateful that they said yes to support. And so we have Lion Babe, which is a funk, R&B, soul duo. Lucas and Jillian. And Jillian's actually Vanessa Williams' daughter.
Okay.
But she holds her own. They've they had songs on Insecure and hit records and everything. And they were super excited about lending their name and their voice literally to this event. And so they'll be performing. We have Dawn Richard of Danity Kane. She's performing. And then Jessica Six which is a band that's my own personal favorite. Ruiz is a Puerto Rican trans woman. She's the lead singer. And they have had a lot of hits over in Europe and here, like dance, music, underground culture. And then we have some, and then of course we have tons of trans artists and performers that we've asked to open for these artists, so that the audiences tuning in can also see what transgender musicians and performers are also creating. And then we have some special guests. So we have India Moore of Pose, the television show. We have Trace Lissette. She was in Hustlers with J-Lo and on Transparent. She's coming on. And Raquel Willis, who's a dear friend of mine, writer, activist. Who else? Ian Harvey, who's a comedian. He was on Will and Grace. And he's a trans man comedian and has done like stand-up comedy and used to work with Margaret Cho and do shows for her. And so, and then more. We have so many other great performers and influencers and special guests. And then, yeah, it's happening December 11th. And the live stream is actually happening on the Transgender District's YouTube channel. T.S. Madison is hosting with Diamond Styles. And we have a few surprises up our sleeves that we are working on now. And yeah, I think it's a great moment. I think it's going to be a great moment for folks to just like be in the house. We're not playing any Christmas music. So, you know, the world is like shutting back down again because of the pandemic. And so we wanted to also offer a free event to anyone around the world to tune in and dance in their socks and just celebrate and be grateful for having life and health right now, as so many people are dying during the pandemic. And just so much turmoil has happened in 2020. And we just wanted to close out the year with a positive note. And if you can give, that's amazing. There'll be opportunities to donate during the event. It is free, and we want as many people to attend and just put it on your TV, on your little Roku, and use the YouTube app or something. Like, find a way to celebrate with us.
Well, I think things are getting louder and louder on my end. I had no idea that there was going to be work being done to the house, but yeah, I don't know if it's super loud on your end, but I have headphones on and I can hear it. I'm like, okay, whatever. But yeah, as we end here, the thing that came up when you were talking about not being okay with mediocrity, and that shit is fucking boring. Mediocrity is boring, and we all have so much potential, right? We all have untapped potential. Now it takes work to get to tap into it.
A lot of work.
A lot of fucking work. I had a podcast yesterday, and I was talking to a former female track athlete, and we were just we had a conversation. And we started getting into mental health and working on ourselves and getting into the psychology of performing really well. And we just both kind of looked at each other like, yeah, that shit is not easy. We're not saying that. Yeah, like starting to tap into like who you are and what what your life has been like, what you want to change, what's been good, how you affect other people. Yeah, it's draining. It's extremely draining. But I can't help but be grateful for the opportunity to talk to you as another creative and as another vocal advocate for a community that we don't talk about enough. And if there's I know I'll continue do my own research, and I'm happy we just had like an organic conversation, and we didn't we didn't try to get into like, okay, here are 5 things you can do to and I think we'll get there eventually, but I thought it was there's always communities that need support, and I think as someone who had who's done a lot of reflection, be like, well, I think as a black male, I'm like, well, I was like, all right, who can I support? I mean, I know I know black folks in general, but I was thinking, and I was thinking about this, and specifically around the LGBTQ community. I didn't have that much exposure early on, and I grew up in San Francisco, and I don't think it was because I had any issues, just I wasn't exposed, right? And the more that I have become exposed, the more necessary it is for I would say specifically black folks to unite and stop letting these differences like hinder us from like progress, because it really is. It's our inability to accept people for who they are is fucking kicking us in the ass. You know what I mean? Like there's
I mean, folks I think I'm optimistic. I think
yeah.
I've seen so much of a shift
Mm-hmm.
in the last 10 years.
Good.
And I believe that it'll happen fully.
Oh, it's happening. I agree. It's happening. It's happening. It's like we said before. Sometimes it's hard to step outside of the work and witness what's shifting. I mean, I think just whatever your political views may be, we're seeing the fact that there's a woman of color sitting as vice president of the United States. That in itself is like, what the fuck? Holy shit! Like, okay,
And she's here.
Right. That's what I'm like. Yeah, things are happening. Things are happening. And unfortunately, we don't talk about it enough, which is why I kind of wanted to have this conversation with you, so we could promote that idea that you're talking about of joy and happiness. You know what I mean? So before we end, I'm going to ask you one thing to end the podcast, and I want you to reflect and think about something that you love.
Ooh, something that I love. I guess right now, in this moment, something that I love. Wait, I thought about it. Do I need to say it out loud?
Oh, I would love it if you shared it with me.
Yeah, I am valuing and appreciating. I just had my 31st birthday last week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm just grateful for health and friendship right now.
Beautiful.
I'm really for friends who are meeting me where I'm at. Sometimes I'm really busy and I'm not able to be the friend that I wish I was, but they understand and they support me no matter what, and I support them, and then just have some semblance of health. I think as someone who is plus size, like there's always this messaging that I am unhealthy or I'm gonna die tomorrow, whatever. And then we see with the pandemic and just like everything going on, like to have even just like some semblance of health just is something that I think we take so for granted. Just really grateful for that right now.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, clearly there's stuff happening in the background, and I'm grateful for you sharing that. We'll do this again because I want to get an update on. Love Lab will continue to work alongside you, but I want to get an update on the work you're doing, and how we can support and how we can continue to advocate.
Amazing. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, talk to you soon. Thank you.